Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pacioli's Paradise. Today we have another problem here about Samtech Manufacturing. So this is about fair value and purchase costs and initial valuation. So in this problem, we got Samtech Manufacturing purchased land and building for $4 million. In addition to the purchase price, Samtech made the following expenditures in connection with the purchase of the land and building: title insurance for $34,000. Legal fees for the drawing of the contract for $9,000, prorated property taxes for the period after acquisition of $54,000, and state transfer fees of $5,800. We also have that it says an independent appraisal estimated the fair values of the lands and building if purchased separately at $3.5 million for the land and $1.5 million for the building, respectively. Shortly after acquisition, Samtech spent $100K to construct a parking lot and $58K for landscaping. Okay, so we've got two questions here. The first one's saying, determine the initial valuation of each asset Samtech acquired in these transactions. And the second one says, determine the initial valuation of each asset, assuming that immediately after acquisition, Samtech demolished the building. Okay, demolition costs were $430K. And the salvaged materials were sold for $6.5K. In addition, Samtech spent $97,000 clearing and grading the land in preparation for the construction of a new building. Okay, so a couple things we need to think about here. So when you're finding the initial valuation of an asset, you need to find the total cost of the purchase price for those assets, and then you need to multiply it by that portion of the fair value of that asset. So let me write out that formula for you. So the first thing we need to find is the total cost of this purchase. So our total cost is going to be our purchase price plus title insurance plus these legal fees plus the state transfer fees. So, and one thing they try to trick us with is these prorated property taxes for the period after acquisition. So this is not part of this cost of property taxes is not included in the total cost of acquisition because it's not a cost that comes with acquiring the land and building. It's something you have to pay for after acquisition. Okay. So when we get that, when we get this formula of total cost being purchase price, title insurance, legal fees, and state transfer fees, we're going to get a total of $4 million plus our $34,000 in title insurance plus the $9,000 in legal fees plus the $5,800 in transfer fees. And that gives us a total of $4,048,800. Okay, so that's our total cost that we paid. And now, like I was mentioning before, in order to find the initial valuation of each asset, and in this case, we have two assets here. We have the land and the building. We need to take this total cost and allocate it as a percentage of how these two fair values interact. So what I mean by that is we paid $4 million, but the total fair value of this land and building was actually $5 million, because if we do 3.5 plus 1.5, so it's $5 million. Okay, so what I mean by the percentage or the proportion of each of these fair values as a percentage of the total is we need to take this 3.5 fair value of the land and divide it by the total fair value. And that percentage we will multiply by this total cost number. So let me show you here. This is the formula you can use. So the initial valuation of the asset is the total cost times the ratio of fair value of the asset divided by the total fair value of the assets. So in the case of, let's do land first. So the initial valuation of land is going to be our total cost times the 3.5 million, which was the fair value of the land, divided by 5 million, which is the total fair value of both the land and the building. If we do that, we get 2.834 million. So this equals our initial valuation of land. Okay? Let's do the building. So this is going to be a similar formula. It's going to be our total cost times the ratio of our fair value of the building, which was 1.5 million, divided by the total fair value of the land and building of 5 million. We multiply that, we get 1.214 million. Now, the way you can check your answer here to make sure you did this correctly is that the initial valuation of your assets should add up to the total cost that you've paid. So if I take the initial valuation of my land and my building, I should get this 4.048800. And you can see we do. So now we have the initial valuation of our land and our building. And one other thing to note here is that they mention we spent 100 grand to construct a parking lot and 58 grand on landscaping. So those are actually land improvements. So that's going to be 100 grand plus 58 grand. And that's going to get us a total of 158 grand. Okay? So that's question one. So now we've got question one down. We learned how to do our total cost, how to find our initial valuation of land, building, and land improvements. So let's look at number two. Number two says, determine the initial valuation of each asset, assuming that immediately after acquisition, Samtech demolished the building. Okay? So now in order to find that, we have a little bit of a change here. So in order to find the initial valuation of our land, we need to take what basically happens here is that when the building is demolished, the valuation goes to zero because it doesn't exist anymore. If the building is demolished, it goes to zero, which means that basically this whole purchase price gets allocated to the land and not to the building because the building doesn't exist anymore. So for number two, this formula of finding the initial valuation of each asset, we're basically going to take the entire cost of the purchase, so this 4.048 million, and we're going to add in some of these costs that we paid and subtract some of the money that we made for salvage materials. And that formula is right here. So our initial valuation of land will be the total purchase cost of the land. So this amount right here, we calculated earlier, plus our demolition cost, minus the amount of salvage materials we were able to sell, and then plus any other costs associated with clearing and grading the land. So we're going to take our 4 million and change, add our demolition cost, subtract our salvage material sales, and add our clearing and grading cost. And with that, we get 4.569 million in change. Okay? Now, the only other thing we need to think about here is our land improvements. And nothing else changed with this demolition. We still had this 100K to construct the parking lot and 58K for the landscaping. So our land improvements actually going to be the exact same. It's going to be the 158 grand. Okay? The last thing I'll reiterate is that the building initial valuation is zero. And that's because we demolished it. It doesn't get any cost or valuation assigned to it. The entire cost now gets assigned to the land. Okay? Please leave a like and subscribe if you had any, if you enjoyed this video, and feel free to leave me a comment if you have any questions or have any questions you want me to answer in the next video. Thank you very much.